The Detroit Lions had an interesting, if you want to call it that, first round of the NFL draft where they traded back from number 6 to number 12 and then selected running back Jahmyr Gibbs. And then they later in the first round selected off-ball linebacker Jack Campbell. Now, I'm admittedly not a NFL draft expert, but if you take those two picks at face value, they're both really uninspiring picks. I don't think it's out of line to say that the Lions used both of their 2 first-round picks on 2 of the least influential positions in the NFL when it comes to winning, and especially winning big. No one recently has won a Super Bowl because they had amazing linebackers and because they have an elite running back. I could argue that the last 4 Super Bowl participants, their linebacking core and their running backs weren't outstanding, with Isaiah Pacheco being the potential exception. And I said on my podcast last week that taking a running back in the first round of the NFL draft and building your offense around it is the key to mediocrity. But I'm going to flip-flop on that stance a little bit in regards to not taking a running back in the first round of the draft. For the sake of optimism, I'm going to flip-flop on it. I'd like to trust the process for the Lions and explain a couple reasons why it potentially makes sense that they took a running back in the first round. First, let's look at Lions quarterback Jared Goff. Obviously, Jared Goff had a really good season in 2022 with the Lions, where he threw 29 touchdowns and 7 interceptions and 4,400 yards. When Jared Goff, was at his best, he was playing for the Rams and had very similar numbers with 32 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, and 4,600 yards in 2018, and then 28 touchdowns, 7 picks, and 3,800 yards in 2017. But in those seasons, he was supported by an excellent running game and excellent running back in Todd Gurley, which he obviously does not have either of those things right now in Detroit, and he still managed to put up similar numbers. So it stands to reason that if the Lions are able to bring in a productive running back, which obviously didn't like DeAndre Swift, they brought in Jahmyr Gibbs. If they bring in a productive running back and they're able to establish a better ground game, they should be able to get even more out of Jared Goff and their offense as a whole. Second, in this draft, we saw 2 teams with really smart offensive minds in Arthur Smith, the head coach of the Falcons, and Ben Johnson, offensive coordinator for the Lions. We saw both of those 2 teams take running backs high in the draft, which begs the question of why. I'm going to assume that 2 of the really smart offensive coaches in the NFL know a lot of things that we don't. So there has to be a reason that they were willing to spend precious draft capital on a running back. I'm going to borrow a take from Theo Ash on this one because I think it's a really interesting one. He tweeted asking if Rams head coach McVay's work with Ben Skowronek will usher in an era of 21 personnel with 2 dynamic weapons instead of the traditional fullback. So what McVay did last season was play Ben Skowronek, who is a wide receiver by position, at fullback, typically in an I formation, strong I, that type of thing, to create mismatches in the passing game. So basically the question is, do the Lions and Falcons intend to do something similar with their running back rooms with Jahmyr Gibbs and Jordan Howard for the Lions, and then Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier / Cordero Patterson? So it's an interesting theory and may perhaps provide some context for an otherwise really uninspiring pick. Last reason I understand the Lions bringing in a running back and an off-ball linebacker early in the draft is because of the 49ers. We've seen the 49ers compete and play extremely well without elite quarterback play, given Jared Goff's better than what they have, excellent defenses, and strong running games. It stands to reason that in the NFC, which is significantly weaker in the AFC and as a whole doesn't really have elite quarterbacks, the Lions could try to do the same thing as the 49ers are doing. Take pressure off of Jared Goff and their quarterback, plug holes in your defense, which the Lions made a concerted effort to do in free agency in the draft. The Lions could be looking around the relatively weak NFC outside of the Eagles and looking at their roster and think they have a real chance to make it to the playoffs and potentially make some noise following the same recipe the 49ers have. Given I don't see the Lions defense being as good as the 49ers, but I can see the idea of the Detroit Lions trying to follow the same recipe, especially when you look at their coach, Dan Campbell. That idea just fits the idea we have of him. And it feels like it would work. That idea of what the 49ers are doing would make sense for Dan Campbell to try to attempt as well. That idea just seems copacetic. It seems just to make sense. And to end this topic, while I was writing this, I talked myself into the Lions winning the division next year. So the Lions are going to be your 2023 NFC North champions. You heard it here first.